Okay. Hi, everyone. I'll get started now, so people can keep filtering in as they come through. Thank you all for coming. I am here to talk about what I have called the Socratic Web. But fundamentally, what I want to talk about is the phenomenon that everyone is currently aware of, fake news, which I think of as really misinformation, disinformation, that sort of stuff, and problems with how everyone has gone about trying to address it, and what I think is the only viable solution to actually dealing with it. So to bring everyone up to date, rather than assume we're on the same page, quick recap. Brexit happened, Donald Trump happened. While that was happening, we noticed that there was a lot of misinformation doing the circuits. So then journalists started investigating and found out Macedonian teams were making a lot of money on making these stories. Found a guy in America that was making tens of thousands of dollars a month writing made-up headlines. Everyone started blaming Facebook. Zuckerberg said, no, it's not our fault. Then, we're going to do more to fight it. So they started Mark wrote quite a few little posts about it and did team meetings to try and figure out what Facebook could do about it. And then money started coming. Google started to put 24 million euros into different news projects. They're trying to improve news and the media, 150,000 of which went to fact-checking projects. Facebook spearheads the News Integrity Initiative with $14 million consortium. eBay founder committed $100 million to fighting fake news and hate speech. Then conferences started popping up, Misinfocon. This was a workshop on digital misinformation that was held at the Web and Social Media Conference. This is another one. Basically, any conference that existed that was in the realm of politics, journalism, the web, every single conference now had workshops or talks or panels on fake news. So to say that a lot of resources are being thrown at this problem is an understatement. Hundreds of millions of dollars, academics, journalists, technologists, everyone's working on this, and there's a lot of stuff being done. So with that context in mind, what I want to talk about is how to lose against fake news, what everyone's doing and why I think it's a losing battle and it's actually making the problem worse. Then I want to give a bit of background to explain how I got here. It was something of an accident. I didn't set out to solve this problem, but I found something that I think will help. I'm going to give a little bit of philosophy, what it is to know the truth and getting there, and then bring it all together into the framing of the Socratic Web and what that is. Before I get into the talk, a little bit about my background, because I have a weird background and it sort of comes together nicely on this project. So I studied molecular biology, did a Bachelor of Science. I also did a Bachelor of Arts, so a double degree. And in the arts, I did a double major, philosophy and history and philosophy of science. So I spent university going, how do we know things? What's a good way to be confident of knowing things? This was my interest. And then straight out of my undergrad, I got a job in none of those. I made a website that did affiliate marketing and sort of then spent years doing internet marketing and stumbled into entrepreneurship and started making startups and had to do growth marketing, growth hacking, and general product management sorts of stuff because I'm designing solutions to problems and finding product market fit and all that sort of thing. So I am a web person through and through. Over 10 years now of just living every single day inside the web and knowing every community and how the internet works. But my background is, what is knowledge? So that all sort of comes together in this fake news on the internet thing to give me a very unique perspective, which I think most of the other people that are working on this problem don't have. See, most people that are coming to this new problem, which of course is not new by any measure, misinformation and propaganda has been around forever. But the fake news phenomenon, as we know it now, is a new version of that problem. And so everyone that's coming at it is coming at it from a journalistic background or a technologist background or an academic background. They're coming at it from specific perspectives. And I think they're all missing the wider context. And that's what I think that I bring to this is my generalist understanding of these things, my futurist techno-optimism and all that goes with that. So on with the bulk of the talk. How to lose versus fake news. Breaking this into two sections, and I think these two sections cover just about everything that everyone's working on. So responding on the wrong level is the first one, and this covers two of the main things. Whenever you go to these conferences and people want to go, what do we do about fake news and misinformation? The two that always come up is we need to improve education and we need more money in journalism. We need to improve journalism. We need to create trust in journalists again. So I address both of these by saying they are both responding on the wrong level, or as the image shows, they're bringing knives to a gunfight. So when we think about communication, the basic level of communication is one person speaking to another person. You have an idea, you give it to another person, they've got the idea. If you want to spread the idea further, though, you need to get a crowd of people, maybe. You can spread it to lots of people that way, like I'm doing now, like in a classroom, like in any sort of oratory situation. But if you want to reach further, maybe you can get on the evening news. Maybe you can get on Today Tonight. You get onto the television program in your local area. Or if it's really good and you know how to get into it, national news. Get across the entire country, lots of people seeing it. Maybe you get syndicated across the world, satellite beams around the world. As you can see, though, these are all sort of, the ability to express an idea. But let's imagine someone starts spreading a rumor about you, and maybe that person's Rupert Murdoch, and he owns an entire, global news empire, and every newspaper and news channel around the world is spreading this rumor about you. If you respond to that by grabbing the person closest to you and going, it's not true, don't believe what they say, let me explain the thing, that's going to work for that person. It's a very effective method for fixing that problem with that one person. But it's not going to address the global situation. It's responding on the wrong level. And I want to be very clear here, I'm not saying that it doesn't work. It works. It's a good idea to do that. Tell everyone that's close to you that it's a lie. But it's the wrong level. Ditto, you get up in front of a crowd of people, still the wrong level, doesn't come close to the scale. Now, this is the same, I've sort of just got television and stuff in this, but whether newspapers, books, and becoming a director at Hollywood, these are all different ways we can communicate ideas to large audiences of people. And I've sort of tried to line them up, like a newspaper can go around the country, so it's sort of national, sort of local, depends what you get. Books can go around the world. There are different scales of reach, is what I'm talking about. But what has changed in recent history is this thing, the internet, right? This is obvious. This is the keystone of all human communication. This subsumes everything before it. The internet can be used to have one-on-one conversations, one-to-many boardroom meeting-style video conferences. You can create your own TV channel. You can get onto TV channels. You can watch any TV channel on the net. You can get national coverage. You can get international coverage. You can make websites. You can make your own news company. You can get syndicated on newspapers on the web. You can write books, publish books, read books. You can make movies. You can watch movies. Everything is now on the web. So this one platform contains effectively, give me some caveats, but effectively all human knowledge, all ideas ever contained, stored in one thing, one distributed thing that can't be taken down. And it's accessible by, again with caveats, all humans on the planet. It's not quite at all people yet, but it's getting there. And moving forward into the future, more so. So not only all humans alive now, almost, but all humans will be alive in the future. So we have got all human knowledge accessible to all humans, and more interestingly, all humans able to add to all knowledge. So this is a level of reach and complexity of information that is just so far above everything else that unless you are, for any problem that exists on this level, if you're not responding on that level, you are completely missing the point. So if something happens on the internet within this sort of scale of things, someone is affecting the entire global population or some massive portion of the population through something that they're doing online, going around and telling the people near you that this is untrue isn't going to solve the problem. Getting up and giving talks to large groups of people, isn't going to solve the problem. Which brings me to one of the most common things to do is we need to improve education. This will solve the fake news problem. Improving education will help. Improving education is a great thing to do. We need more critical thinking in our education system. But there are so many problems with this approach that it will never address the real problem we're dealing with here. For a start, everyone's trying to improve education all the time. Everyone knows we need more critical thinking in education. Everyone knows we need to make it better. If only it was so easy to just do it. It's not. So let's say we figure out we need, better media literacy in education. Exactly how you execute that is not an easy problem. You've got to get the funding to do it. You've got to train the teachers. You've got to know what you're training the teachers to do. You've got to then ensure quality within the school, within the different schools, to the whole state, to the whole country. At the end of the day, if you can somehow overcome all of those hurdles to improve education in the right way with all the money that you need, and you can get to all the kids, you still reach like a tiny portion of the global population, because you're only reaching the kids in schools or universities. It's already a privileged subset of the global population. So few people have access to education. The kids that are listening, how many kids are in school that don't care to begin with? There's so many problems with going the education route. And again, to be very clear, it's great that we do this and we need more of it. But it is missing the crux of this problem, which is that massive connection between all information and all humans. Really, the second level that people want to act on is improve journalism. So this is a great example of it that's come up recently. Jimmy Wales, the founder of Wikipedia, came up with Wiki Tribune, which is sort of a crowdsourced journalistic endeavour. It's an attempt to become completely objective and reliable source of truth. And I'm all for this. We need more of this. We need more money in journalism. We need to make this work. But as a solution to this problem, it's on the wrong level. And you can see that because if you go online and then you're trying to access good information, sometimes it gets hard to find it behind all the fake news. Because it doesn't matter how many brilliant, positive, well-constructed sources of information you make, it doesn't get rid of the bad information. So the way the internet's set up, right, anyone can say anything anywhere. There's no regulation, there's no control that exists. So the problem is the access point. And I bring this up as an example. I feel like there's a law that could be made. For every decent, high-quality, factual website, there is an equal and opposite website telling you that it's wrong. So this is a website called Conservapedia, and this is its entry on Wikipedia, and I have to read this. Wikipedia is an online wiki-based encyclopedia hosted and owned by the non-profit organisation Wikimedia Foundation, and is financially supported by grants from left-leaning foundations, plus an aggressive annual online fundraising drive. Most of Wikipedia's articles can be edited publicly by both registered and anonymous editors, mostly consisting of teenagers and the unemployed. As such, it tends to project a liberal, and in some cases even socialist, communist and Nazi sympathising worldview, which is totally at odds with conservative reality and rationality. So Wikipedia is possibly one of the best sources we have for just fundamental outlines of facts. It's a really well done website, but it doesn't matter how many times you do that, how thoroughly you make that work, there'll be someone who disagrees with the conclusions and will go and make their website, critiquing it and coming up with their own versions. And to make this point perfectly clear, shortly after the 2016 election, Craig Silverman did this research. In the months leading up to the election, he found that during these critical months of the campaign, 20 top-performing false election stories from hoax sites and hyper-partisan blogs generated 8.7 million shares, reactions and comments on Facebook. Within the same time period, the 20 best-performing election stories from 19 major news websites generated a total of 7.3 million shares, reactions, comments on Facebook. Mainstream news, the brand names everyone knows, CNN, MSNBC, BBC, all these websites that have millions of dollars, thousands of journalists working, putting lots of time into these articles, got less shares on Facebook than websites that you've never heard of by people that have no training, that make stuff up. This is the reality we live in. It doesn't matter how much you put into making journalism work if the system itself prefers a convenient lie that gets reactions. So, if we focus on education, we're getting a tiny subset of the population. If we focus on improving journalism or making better journalism or better factual websites, we get these tiny little bleeps on the map of the web where there's truth. But that does nothing to deal with all the other information and all the other people. We need to address this problem on the right level. If that isn't obvious, the level is kind of here. It's the choke point between the people and the internet, how people access information and how they contribute to it. We can't control the web. It's a distributed, decentralized, unregulated body of information, which is brilliant. That's what makes it powerful. But we have a control point, which is how people access it. And to be perfectly clear, and this is what everyone's talking about, Google and Facebook. Google owns 80% of search. Facebook's the world's largest social media. But of course, there's also WeChat, Weibo, Renren. There's a few, of course, Twitter and Reddit. There's lots of different social media platforms. Facebook's the largest, but let me just use Facebook as shorthand for all social media and all those different platforms. So lots of people talk about targeting these. I also think that there's other choke points, which is the browsers we use. Again, Chrome, owned by Google, is 50 to 75% of the browser market. Firefox, Internet Explorer, Edge, Safari. Between these companies and these things, this is how everyone accesses the web. So this is a choke point, which raises the next big question. What do you do to that choke point to fix the problem of fake news? Question mark, that's the question. What you don't do is decide what is true and what is not true for everyone. I've just answered the question by telling you what not to do, but let's see, who thinks that we should handle misinformation online with a central authority that declares the truth dogmatically? No one wants that. Who thinks we should improve critical thinking to help the public understand complex issues? Everyone knows, everyone wants this. This is so super obvious, right? Everyone knows this. So why is everyone pushing the web giants into deciding true and false for everyone? Google's doing it a little bit, and they've done research on their knowledge base. I'll get into that a bit later. Facebook using the Pointer fact-checking network to outsource fact checks and then flag information. And between when Facebook acted and when they were under a lot of pressure to act, people started making plugins. And this is just one example of one. It took 36 hours for these students to solve Facebook's fake news problem. The browser plugin adds a little tag in the corner that says whether the story is verified or not. This is true, this is not true. They decide on behalf of the user. So I'm not really criticizing the companies for this. This is directly a response to what everyone's telling them to do. Everyone's saying there's a problem, do something. And it's not obvious what you do when there's misinformation, other than go, well, that's wrong, get rid of it. Because that's what we've always done. As editors of newspapers, as editors of books, as editing staff of a channel, we decide what we want to publish on our platform or not. But this is fundamentally different. Facebook is not an editorial channel. It's a platform for everyone. That's their target audience, everyone that uses the internet. Same with Google. So that creates a different power dynamic, and they're in a different situation because of that choke point. 80% of all search, it's a different level. So if we're going to work at that level, we need to figure out how to act. Now, at the moment, if we take this path of deciding what is true and what is not true, these are my criticisms of that approach. First of all, who do you trust with this power? A little animation just to make it a little bit more visual. All information's up there. You're down there with the rest of the global population. And if Facebook and Google are deciding and say, no, not true, not true, not true, not true, they're filtering the feed for you. Do you really trust Facebook and Google to be making these decisions for you? You also notice some of the little green ones are getting through. Occasionally, are they perfect? They're going to miss some things. I'll get into that in a second. Do you trust them? Do you trust the US government? Who can you trust with this ability to control the flow of information from all human knowledge to the entire human population forever into the future? I don't think there's anyone that can be trusted with that level of responsibility. And so a lot of people will feel the same way, and they'll go elsewhere. If Facebook starts deciding true and false, they'll go elsewhere. And this has already happened. Gab, the alt-right's very own Twitter, is the ultimate filter bubble. People started feeling like Facebook is a lefty platform for people with progressive lefty ideology. So they decided it's social media for lefties, we're going elsewhere where we have free speech, where don't like politically correct terms. So in the interest of supporting their hatred of politically correct speech, I don't know why the journalist that wrote the headline there used PC term for what you could say is social media for Nazis. And then what next? Social media for hippies? If we're going to start saying, we don't like the way that this platform's sorting, people will start being divided ideologically. And if you think that there's echo chambers now, wait until we get divided into different social media platforms and we never see people that disagree with us. At the moment, we see them. We see them on Facebook. But we get divided into this sort of style and we will never see different opinions. Yeah, go ahead.
Don't we have that with newspaper already?
Yes, but the beautiful thing is, and this is why it's a different level thing, we pick and choose between whether you want to read Fox News or Huffington Post or The Guardian or whatever, right? But they're all there in society. We get to pick and choose, but that's not the only source of information we get. They don't control all information flow. You can read your newspaper, you can go to the television, you read books, and then there's different ways of talking. And now, of course, you go online and you can get a variety of different sources from different websites. So this is the free market mode of accessing information, and it's brilliant. But the difference is that level thing. This social media controls your access to all newspapers when it comes to the internet. And increasingly, as we move forwards, like, we can still go and buy newspapers, but who here buys newspapers? I don't. A couple of people do. Wait till you have kids and wait to see whether they buy newspapers. So I'm looking into the future, and the future is everything's online and everything is accessed through, like, I don't know what's next, but we've already got an indication that search and social media is how we access what's on the internet. And so if we have Facebook deciding Breitbart and InfoWars and Natural News are all untrue, which I agree with them completely, it's full of crap, what that does is the people that subscribe to them and believe those publications will go, I don't like this platform anymore, I'm going elsewhere. And so now on Facebook, you will only get a selection of information which fits to a particular, their filter, whatever it is. And again, are we trusting them with it? Are we trusting the people that they outsource it to? So some people won't, and some people will go elsewhere. And my point on this particular slide is that we will be dividing the world into ideological camps that never see each other ideologically, but still live together, still work together, or will need to, still need to vote together, still have to run communities together, until you find out that this person that's your next door neighbour is one of those Gab people, and Facebook's been telling us that those people are Nazis and they want to exterminate everyone, and then you find out that they're one of them, and you kind of want to kill them before they kill you, because this is the sort of way ideological divides work. We monsterize the other. And when we start doing this on a global scale, it sort of happened in the Cold War, right? America versus Russia. The communists are evil and want to kill everyone. I'm sure in Russia they said the same thing about America. But they had a continent between them. It sort of unified their countries against each other. Not great for the world, but it is effective for, making communities work together. Now imagine applying that same thing, but instead of it being continents apart, it's entwined within our society, so internally conflicted. Anyway, this is one of my big fears that will come out of this process of deciding true and false on different platforms. I've got to move on. I'm probably wasting too much time going into the details. So control, who do you trust with the control? And we get ideological chambers coming out of it. How do we guarantee accuracy? So Facebook's partnered with the Pointer Fact-Checking Network. Now, I respect the Pointer Fact-Checking Network and all the fact checkers that they have in their network. They have a particular code of conduct, they get checked and whatever. And I think they're all pretty good. But at the end of the day, Facebook is basically going, well, we don't want to be responsible for deciding true and false, so we're going to give it to Pointer to decide who they trust, to decide who the journalists will be, to decide what is true and false. So it's just passing the buck down the line till a person decides, does the research and decides. But all these organisations have their profit motive and or, at least their revenue needs, and there's a whole process and many steps along the way which can be broken. Maybe it ends up being good, maybe it doesn't. But also at the end point, there's still Facebook that decides which articles are going to be flagged or not. So they don't, the things that come up as potentially untrue aren't automatically connected to the fact checks because there's no map of them, at least in this system. But there's another simpler critique. This study came out just 2 weeks ago, assessing the effect. So the story of that, tagging fake news on Facebook doesn't work, study says. Key line takeaway, key point to matters here. The existence of flags on some, but not all, false stories made Trump supporters and young people more likely to believe any story that was not flagged. So unless your flagging system gets all of them, people are going to believe misinformation is true because it's not flagged. So are all of your flagged stories actually false? Are all of the stories that aren't flagged actually true? These are some serious problems that this approach has. And this is the first implementation of it. What happens next? So Google is still doing algorithmic things and deciding authority, which has different issues and is much more complex to sort of critique and, whatever. But they've done research on using their fact vault, what's it called, knowledge base. And so they try and get like lots of different people that they trust and go, well, they all seem to agree on this point, therefore that's probably true, and everyone that says otherwise is probably false. There's no indication that they're going to implement that, but they've done the research, and they'll keep looking at it, and maybe they will one day. So do we want to trust a system that sort of homogenizes beliefs and decides which one's true or false? There's so many ways that could be abused. There's so many ways that could fall down. It also tends to marginalise fringe voices that may be telling truths that society doesn't want to hear. The truth and false is a very complex thing in society because there are lots of people that, like as a scientist, I do believe in objective truth, but when it comes to cultural, social things, it's complicated. Which leads us to maybe the end goal. So if the first iteration is humans deciding on behalf of other humans, is the end goal a perfect artificial intelligence? So a make-believe thing that's perfect and absolutely benevolent, that really cares to get to the truth. There's no agenda at play. This brings us to the worst outcome of all. Let's imagine we implement this system. Now remember the original question. Do we want a central authority or do we want critical thinking? The reason we all want critical thinking is because no one wants to live in a society where everyone just goes, oh, tell us what to think, great algorithm that tells us the truth. We don't like being told what to think. And we don't like everyone around us being blind believers. But if we create an internet where a perfect artificial intelligence filters out all the misinformation and only gives us truths, the next generation will only know a world where they never need to question anything. They will never need to doubt anything. They will... If I know one thing about humans for sure, it is that we are intellectually lazy. If we don't have to do anything, we won't. And kids growing up in a world where everything's true will believe whatever they're told. Remember, we need more education. Imagine trying to teach these kids in that world about critical thinking, media literacy. How do you know this is true? Miss, when will I ever use this in the real world? So to recap, this is my criticism. And as far as I'm pretty sure this covers what everyone is doing to fight fake news. They're trying to improve education, trying to improve media performance, improve trust, which is responding on the wrong level. The correct level is these arrows up here, the interface between the global population and all human knowledge. And whatever that happens to be, we need to act there. But if we act there by telling everyone what to believe and what is true, or deciding this is satire and this is not satire, and adjudicating on classifications, then that creates another handful of problems which are far worse than getting misinformation into our news stream. So, what is the method of acting? How do we act at that choke point without ruining the planet? So, in 2011... someone shared this article, a precursor to it. It's change articles all the time, on Facebook. And at the time, the title said, "Big Study Reveals." And I'm like, oh, there's a new study that shows that vaccines cause these illnesses. So I clicked on it and I read it. And background in molecular biology, I understand how science works. This was a poll of people on an anti-vaccine website asking how healthy their unvaccinated children were compared to background medical data. So it's just like a self-selected biased poll. It was clear to me what was wrong with it, but I didn't want to just go back to my friend and say, this is wrong. I wanted to show them an argument of why it was wrong so they could understand. But when I went to Google to try and find rebuttals like this one, which existed, August 2011, and this one, 30th November 2011, these existed at the time. I couldn't find them because Google doesn't find context-specific articles. It doesn't find relationships between articles. It's a keyword search term, search engine. So I didn't know what websites these articles were on. I didn't know what words they used. I didn't know what headline they used. I couldn't find them, and I spent hours searching, and I'm really good at finding things on the web. This came up after the time, that was in later 2012. And even when you search, like that's the title of the article, Vaccinated Children, even if you search that with rebuttal, debate, critique or whatever, what you end up getting is just thousands of copies of this article because one person publishes it and everyone syndicates it across their crappy blogs and you've got 1,000 copies of it. So I couldn't get through the noise. And it was frustrating because I knew they existed, because I know the web, someone has an opinion, someone disagrees with it. I couldn't find it. I'm like, isn't it obvious that from this page I should be able to access a list of all the people that have critiqued this page? Surely the people that have written these critiques want their critiques to be found by the people on this page. I understand why the author of this page doesn't want to provide that list, but there should be a way for the people that are critiquing this page to get their links on this page, or at least associated with it, some sort of critique search engine. So that was the beginning of Rebutter. That idea that infuriated me so much that I spent 6 months looking for someone to have done it because it seemed really obvious, but no one had. So we built a browser extension. We made a little Twitter reply widget where you can just hit reply and it should send them links of the critiques to whatever they've tweeted. A hack. You add rebutter.com/ in front of any URL on any platform and any device, and it will bring up our frame and show you the critiques of that page. A Reddit reply bot, so we can activate that in the subreddit, and anyone that shares a link, which is in our database, it'll reply saying you might also be interested in this extra information. And we worked on that for 2 or 3 years. As a startup, never had a revenue model. It was never really obvious how it would make money. Turns out critiquing people and telling them that what they believe is wrong is not very cool or very fun, and a lot of people, you target a very tiny subset of the population that are interested in this. So
Is that also something that we're going to reinforce there already?
Depends on the context and how it's done, and not necessarily. So you're referring to the backfire effect,
Yeah.
and it depends on the type of belief, whether it's a core ideological belief, and how it's gone about. And actually, and what's frustrating from my perspective on all this, I just presented it like people don't like being told they're wrong. I always argued that Rebutter doesn't tell you you're wrong. All Rebutter ever did was said, this person over here says you're wrong. And not even says you're wrong, it says this article that you're reading, this person said that's wrong. So it's come on, install it, it's awesome. And we had success. We had about 20,000 active users at one point, with 30,000 rebuttals in the database. We were quite successful by many measures. But there was no clear sight to revenue and growth, and it was a challenging thing to do. So I had to do other things for a couple of years, but I had lots of time to think about what we learned from it. And what I really learned was that the key value in the entire proposition was the database. And this is all it was. This page rebuts that page. It's so simple. How that it manifested, though, is pretty profound, which is this page on the left. It has 11 rebuttals to it, but in the database, they have 11 separate entries. This page is critiqued. But, of course, we can present it as this is a common page, 11 different rebuttals, and now people can, as they read these critiques, go, that's a pretty good critique, and upvote it. If it's not a critique at all, or it's spam or whatever, you hit the spam button, get rid of it. But if it's good, upvote it. And so what can happen is these 11 pages that are all ostensibly on the same side, they're at least critiquing that first page. Doesn't mean they all agree, but they're all critical of the first. That's the one necessary factor. They compete amongst themselves. So when you vote on these things, you're not voting to say that that article is correct and this one is wrong, though you may believe so. But what you're voting on is that this article down the bottom here, you're voting it up, you're saying this one is better than all the articles above it. And your objective is to get the best argument against this page to the top. And then the people that disagree with that best argument, or any of them, can critique that. And again, and then the same. I want to reiterate that all of these articles here are pages that already exist on the web. We're not making them. We're not curating them. We're not adjudicating whether they're right or wrong or reliable or not. All we're doing is saying, hey, public, tell us about critiques that you find. We want all of them. And then decide which ones you like about between those critiques so that we can get the best critique to the top of each response. And what we've done now is we have created an internet where if you land on any one of these pages, you're immediately placed in the middle of an idealized debate of the issues. We've just organized the web to make it easier to get to the crux of the issue. Content that already exists without doing anything particularly tricky, just a database of this rebuts that and then allowing people to vote on those rebuttals. So that's what I realized about Rebutter. That's where the power of Rebutter was. And so I've had a few years to think about that. And then the fake news thing came about. And watching everyone try and do this, we've got to determine what is fake and what is not fake, sort of gets to this thing of what is the truth? And that's a very complicated issue. 2,000 plus years of philosophy has taught us anything. It's that anyone that claims to know the truth is lying or mistaken. We have no way to access objective truth, but we've come up with, as best I can tell, 2 methods for approaching what is functionally true, a practical truth. And the first one is the Socratic method. If anyone doesn't know much about that, basically Socrates was told he was the wisest man in Athens, and he's like, but I know nothing. I know nothing. How could I be wise? And so he went around to all the wise people, the lawyers and the politicians and the poets and the whoever, and said, you know about law, tell me about it. How do you know that? But how do you know that? No, you're not explaining it, you're just defining it, but what does that mean? And he just asked them questions until they realized that they didn't know jack all either. And so this became the Socratic method of critiquing and questioning something and challenging beliefs until you get to the crux of it, which is they don't really know, but they can come up with sort of answers. What I take from this, so true knowledge is gained only by constantly questioning assumptions that underlie all we do. To achieve truth is to engage in a permanent state of critical thinking, critiquing claims. And what I take away from this is that we never get to this point that we know anything. We never have the truth. But what we do is we become incrementally less wrong. We know that this belief that I held, that I thought was true, I've critiqued it and I've realized that that's not true. So we can discard it. It's gone. Do we know the truth now? No. But at least we're not believing something that's false. So we are better off than we were. And now this got encoded as the ideal behind philosophy by Karl Popper. He got knighted for figuring out this process of differentiating between real science and fake science by saying that real science is anything that comes up with falsifiable principles. This is my theory, and if you find this, then that theory is false. Boom, that's science. And the ideal is we come up with theories, and then we go out of our way to prove it false. We don't go, I think all swans are white, I'm going to go and find 100 swans and prove my theory true, because it doesn't. Because we can never prove a theory true. All we can ever do is prove things false. Okay, so these are the best two things we've got from thousands of years of philosophy figuring out how to get to truth. And they both come down to these things. They don't claim to know what truth is. There's no need to trust anyone. At no point do you go, hey, we know what the truth is because Darwin told us the truth. You read The Origin of Species, he spends the entire book going, if you find this, then I'm wrong. If you find this, then I'm wrong. This is why it's such a profound book. And all emphasis on challenging and is on trying to challenge information. I.e., consider things critically, discard that which is incorrect, and become incrementally less wrong with time. So, again, back to this question. We want people telling us what is true or false, or do we want people that can critically think and decide for themselves? Turns out we don't know what is true or false, but a population of people engaged in this process of critiquing everything they read, questioning what they read, being reminded to doubt what they read, is the best method we have for getting to the truth in a pragmatic sense. Or, as we think of it sort of scientifically, is a tentatively true-ish statement. It's true for now until we improve it. So what if we can programmatically make the web, which at the moment is just this dumb information-giving system. You know, I want to believe that we didn't land on the moon. Google, we didn't land on the moon. You get information that says we didn't land on the moon. What if we could make the web stop just being an information delivery system and start being an information critiquing system by default, everywhere you go? So when Facebook implemented their flagging system, it looks like this. When you start to do a post, it tells you that this link that you've posted is critiqued. When it shows up on your newsfeed, it tells you that it's critiqued. Instead of having Facebook tell us that that's wrong, according to these people, and getting the obvious reaction of, oh, this isn't reliable, Facebook's now biased, what if they just implemented a system which just provided critiques of every link that comes up? You know, if we had basically the rebuttal database, we have the database of every claim critique connection, and every time a link is shared, goes to the database, gets all the critiques, puts them up in this non-obtrusive, doesn't tell you that it's wrong sort of way that's just part of the average decor. You click on it, gives you a list of all the critiquing articles. It's totally up to you. You don't have to use it if you don't want. You click on one of them, it takes you to that website, and now in your browser there's a little button that you can click to access all the critiques of this page. And just to make that clear, browsers already have this functionality into them. It's just an extra button. Again, inobtrusive. It's not telling you what to believe. It's just providing you access to critiques everywhere you go. Google Search could do it with their little drop-down, cached similar critiques of this page. There's so many ways that this can be integrated into websites as they work now without being in your face and without being a big deal. And so that brings me to the vision that I have. I'm tentatively calling it Ask Socrates because I got that domain, but It can be called whatever, and anyone can do it. I'm so early in this process of like making this happen that I'm here to advocate for this being done, and I don't care how it comes about because I believe the internet needs it. But I think it needs to be a non-profit, open source, open access consortium, like the World Wide Web Consortium, at the center of the internet, and it needs to be as trustless as possible because we are talking about someone influencing that choke point of all human knowledge to all humans. This is crucial for the future. So it needs to be something where someone can't abuse it. And this needs to be set up with collaboration between all these organizations and others, but they're the obvious ones. And we need to collaborate with them so that when we redesign this database from scratch, it meets their needs. They will need to have safeguards in place, quality assurances, make sure that they don't get malware and porn or whatever turning up in their news feed, which at the moment Rebutta doesn't have those protections. You can get anything popping up. It's mostly pretty good quality, but we don't have that protection. So it needs to be redone from scratch to have certain quality assurances in place. Because the end vision is we create this database, it's at the center of the web, everyone knows about it. All the fact-checking organizations or anyone that writes a critique will just know that I've written a critique, I should register it with the Socrates database. It should just be there because everyone needs to know about this critique. And then Facebook, Twitter, Chrome, everyone who has any interest in not spreading misinformation should plug into it and include those references in their platforms. Now, of course, this vision, we just control the database. Facebook still controls their interface and how they design it and how they implement it. They split test it. They make it work for them. Google does the same. Twitter does the same. It's all on them how they integrate it. It's just about getting the data collected. And in order to get the data collected, all we need is these platforms to go, that's a good idea, we'll do it. Because the second they say that they will do it, everyone that writes a critique will be registering it in the database. And then other third-party people like plugins may integrate it as well and do other things. So this is the end. What really motivates me here is that this solution is so technically simple. It's frustrating. Like this database can be built for next to nothing. And meanwhile, hundreds of millions of dollars are being thrown at solutions that are on the wrong level and solutions that are technically challenging to say the least, possibly impossible, creating artificial intelligence that tells truth and false apart. Artificial intelligence that decides what's trustworthy and what's not trustworthy. Is this we all have the same idea of what trustworthy is? And I'm going around saying, hey, will you make a database that connects pages together, the one rebuts the other? So simple to do. Completely neutral answer to misinformation. You have to trust anyone, doesn't take any position on anything, and it promotes critical thinking by its very existence. Now, I note that it's necessary, part of the solution, but not sufficient. As in, I think that without this, the internet is just, we're going to keep having fake news, we're going to keep having problems, and other solutions are going to make things worse. I think that this is necessary moving forwards, but it's not going to make misinformation go away. My hope is that it creates the next generation instead of being those passive receivers that just believe whatever they're told. My hope is that the next generation will grow up going, the current generation grows up going, I don't know what blah is, I'll just Google it. Whereas my parents are more like, I don't know how blah is, I guess I'll never know, right? That generational difference. I want the next generation to grow up going, hey, someone said this, I wonder what the critique is. I wonder how to challenge that. That's what I see the real impact of this being. So the difficulty is getting there. And as far as I can tell, these are the three of them. Getting buy-in from the organizations, getting Facebook, Google, and Twitter to go, this is awesome and we want it. But that's a process and it's begun. The algorithm to sort the critiques, the voting mechanism, will be an iterative algorithmic, arms race. No different to what Google does with their algorithm. Okay, started off quite simple, very complex now, but it's mostly to stop spammers and gaming. And how to allow voting from distributed interfaces. Does everyone on Facebook get to vote? Does everyone on Twitter get to vote? Can you have 20 accounts voting? That's a slightly difficult problem, but again, we start building this and we have people from Facebook and Google interested in it and participating. We all have the best minds on the planet working on these incredibly simple problems compared to artificial intelligence, machine learning, and so forth. So my whole purpose of being here is to spread this message and create a paradigm shift so that everyone starts recognizing that what everyone else is doing is a really bad idea, and please spread that message. To help people understand that critiquing misinformation is the best we've got of getting towards truth, and to help find anyone that can find ways to help, to support, to help make this happen, and or go and create your own version of this and make it happen. I don't care how it comes about, it just needs to exist. And that's my talk. I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Can I give you the mic so we can record you?
Okay, I've got a comment and a question. One, do you really think that critical thinking will change? Like people who are not critical thinkers will suddenly become critical thinkers because there's a rebuttal there. I mean, my experience is people who don't want to think and don't want to hear any other, won't believe it even if they say there's something there.
Do you want me to respond that and then do the second one?
And the second one is, what's to say that the rebuttals aren't just more people putting forth false information in a volume to which it overpowers, pizza parlor is a front for pedophiles run by Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
Somebody says, no, that's not right. And then 500 more people give testimony that, yes, I was at the pizza parlor. Yes, it's true. What's to say that the fake information doesn't overpower the...
Okay, so the first question, do I think that this will help non-critical thinkers become critical thinkers? That works on multiple levels. First of all, everyone thinks that they're a critical thinker. I don't... Yeah, pretty much. Doesn't mean it's true, but no one thinks that they're the idiot that doesn't understand things. All my beliefs are definitely true. You probably think all your beliefs are true too, and you probably arrived at them for reasonable reasons. But that's mostly irrelevant. As I said, this is a necessary part of the solution, but not sufficient. It's not going to make people be more intelligent than they are. It's not going to make them change their desires and their belief systems necessarily. It may affect some, but the objective is not necessarily to go into the Catholic Church and convince all the bishops that God's not real. That's just a lost battle. And then this is not trying to do that. But you may be able to go into the Catholic Church and convince them all that fluoride is not killing them, because they don't care about that issue and they have no opinion and they've never heard of that debate. But there's a debate around that. And if they go on Google and they Google fluoride's poison, they may get convinced that it's poison. But this system, because this system will allow them to approach it from a proper debate rather than just a rabbit hole of echo chambers and reinforcement. So for every single person out there, the number of things we have strong beliefs about are a tiny fraction of all the things we can have beliefs about. And so this works most effectively on the things that you don't already have preconceived notions or beliefs about. It will help you form better informed opinions. But most importantly, it'll work on the next generation. So those people that are growing up, as I said, being trained to just have that moment of, I wonder why this might be untrue. So you don't have to be like a philosophically trained critical thinker and have all the nuances of these things. You just need to have that, the strongest thing. And I think this has been borne out in research, and I need to make sure I get that data so I have this fact for the future. The most important thing in critical thinking is that moment where you go, I wonder if this is true. That is more profound than anything else that you can do, because most people just go, ha ha ha, I knew that was right, share. There's an emotional reaction to just believing it because it reinforces a belief. So that moment of, I wonder if this is true or not, could make the biggest profound thing. And this sort of process where it's always present going, someone disagrees, someone disagrees, someone disagrees, is already profoundly impactful. Again, particularly for the next generation that will normalize this environment. But secondly, having access to examples of how to critique things is a sort of training for critiquing. Because the other thing, without a doubt, about humans is that we are copying machines. We copy what we see our peers do and what's present in society. And so at the moment on the internet, we're creating a world where we just believe what we read, and whatever our peers say is true, we tend to sort of accept as true. If we can create an internet that's constantly saying question everything and doubt everything, then we can completely change the global culture to one of critique and doubt of claims until we can sort of, dig into them a little. So, yeah, it's not going to suddenly correct ignorant people and people that aren't interested, but it doesn't need to. Because we're acting on the level of all humans across the entire planet with this, on that level, we create 1% difference every year. This is moving on perpetually. The impact that tiny fraction makes every year compounded is incredibly profound. And the second question was, I've forgotten. Oh yeah, overwhelming. So the way the system works, because it doesn't, even if you have 100,000 critiques of a page, it's like when you go to Google and you search for a word, you can get 10 million responses. You don't read them all. It's irrelevant. You get the best ones. That's all you care about. You just read the top 1, 2 or 3 or whatever, the first page. And this will be sort of the same. So it doesn't matter how many, no, I saw it, it's definitely true, it's definitely true. You get hundreds of thousands of pages. At the end of the day, people are only going to read the top one or the top 2 or 3 because they want to get a strong argument, a compelling use case. The internet already provides the option for people to overwhelm social media or platforms or newspapers or comment fields or whatever in that capacity. This system actually allows you to cut through it by organizing them all, going, you are all alike. Let's just cut the noise and get to the one that matters. And then if they try and do the same on the counter to that, to their own point, they try to overwhelm that, they are not critiques. So they get removed very quickly. It has to be critical. So in this system, they overwhelm the first one, but it doesn't matter. You go to the top one, and then the people can respond to that top one with some sensible, reasonable argument saying, yeah, you guys have tried to flood this. You guys have made all this up, but you've got no evidence for it. This is a sock puppet just acting it all out. And it just cuts through the noise and gets straight to what matters.
Thanks for the talk. Very good stuff. I just wanted to elaborate on this. We have this problem with fake news on social media already, with bots masquerading as people and reinforcing various points. So I don't quite see how this would cut through the noise in this sense. If you can, the voting part is the dangerous part there, right? If you're going to have a bot that can masquerade as a person long enough to reinforce a point, and the point's reinforced, the bot goes away when you discover it's a bot, and fine, you can take all their votes away, but the damage might be done already. And also on that stream, we are approaching a place in the research in natural language processing and speech generation where bots will be really easily flying through the Turing test very soon, in the next couple of years probably. And that gets you into a point where you can't quite discriminate against users because you think they're bots. Yeah. So that's a worry that I have about all this.
So I still don't see how the bots would be able to manipulate this flow necessarily. So they can come in and they can make their point, but they've still got to make the argument, right? And what really differentiates this from everything else, at the end of the day, the person that's engaging in this and reading the articles still has to make up their own mind. So the arguments being presented, whether by bots or by humans or whoever writes them, need to be compelling. And if there's some flaw in them, then the system allows the other people, whoever else, the rest of the internet, to respond. So if you read it and you go, hey, that's a pretty good critique of what I just read, it's a bot submitted one and upvoted or whatever, then you go to the next page and they go, no, this is crap for these reasons. You can go, I didn't think of that. So it's the nature of the process is self-correcting because every following step critiques the last. And eventually you're going to reach a point where I can't be bothered reading anymore or whatever. But still, at the end of the day, it's the person, every individual that engages in this gets to decide how far you want to read, how much you care, and what conclusion you reach. Now, I'm not saying that every single person that engages in that will come out the other end with the right conclusion. But it's not about that. It's about prompting everyone to engage a little bit more critically with information in the first place, which is a significant improvement on what we already have. And it's maybe affecting that process by that 1%. Whereas at the moment, you're on Facebook and you get these same bot-based systems flooding it and creating, that sort of the grass astroturfing impression of popularity and whatever. That's what's happening already. So at the moment, everyone's being manipulated and has no recourse, has no correction method, has no feedback process. So again, what excites me about this is that it's like an almost algorithmic process of self-correction, which doesn't exist anywhere and doesn't work at all in the current system. So every gaming that comes into it, the system resists. It's like an equilibrium where just every push you get a natural resistance. Whereas current social media, you push in a lot of bots and a lot of astroturfing and you just get a lot of bots and astroturfing. There's no natural resistance to it. And with the natural language processing, they can automatically write it doesn't change a thing. Yeah, I think sort of covered that, right?
Any other questions?
Do argue back if you disagree. I'm all about being corrected.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a problem with Facebook trying to flag false articles and that kind of thing. Do you think it would be at all possible for them to just flag articles as true if they could ever figure that out? As in, one of the very few things I trust on the internet is when I see like a Facebook tick or a Twitter tick next to a verified account. I'm like, oh, that is the actual person. I'm not likely to believe that anything else is 100% true unless I see that.
Yeah. It still has fundamentally the same flaw. Deciding true is, like, arguably, like, by the nature of the Socratic method and Popperian, the thing that we know we can most easily do is say, well, that's definitely not true. Because when you think of any idea, there are infinite ways for it to be wrong, and only one way it can be right, in an objective sense, right? So it's much easier to identify what's false than it is to figure out what's true, because the reality is we never really know. Of course, there's a pragmatic sense of truth. But yeah, it still comes down to that exact same problem of, do you really trust Facebook to decide what is true for you rather than what's false? Do you want a world where you just get to turn off because Facebook's decided truth for you? It's still, and the implication by the false flags is that everything else is verified true. And that's what they're working towards, arguably, is a point where, okay, then we've got this sorted now, all the untrue stuff's gone, implied true, same difference.
So if I can add another comment, this week I was on my Facebook feed, and this has happened a couple times this year, and up the top I see an article saying Hugh Hefner passed away. Immediately below it I see an article saying Hugh Hefner passing away is a hoax, right? So if there's no way to verify what is true and what isn't, then like, is there any point in having articles about things that can't be determined true at all?
Yeah. Did you decide whether Hugh Hefner died or not?
I don't think it's particularly relevant to my life, so I didn't really.
And that's just as meaningful an answer. It doesn't matter to you, so you don't care, so you don't engage with it. For every point, so you've got a claim and then a counterclaim, and then in this system, of course, there'd be a counterclaim to that because he did die, apparently. I've seen enough reports from enough outlets and enough comments that it looks like he died to me. That's the conclusion I reached. But at no point in that process do I want the government or Facebook deciding whether he died or not for me. Yeah?
Actually, I do want the government appoint some coroner to make that.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, I don't want to inspect his body. But it's still at every point the crucial thing. The big difference here is I'm advocating for that sort of almost free market of ideas for each individual. It's up to you to decide what you believe. Not because I think truth is some airy-fairy thing where we get to decide what is true or not, but it doesn't matter how real objective truth is. At the end of the day, each of us individually will decide what we believe. So I want to give every individual... do you disagree with that? Yeah. Yeah, they will decide. So I want to give every individual the best platform for reaching the right conclusion. Whereas at the moment, the way the internet's set up is go and find the information that you want to find to corroborate with your beliefs. I'm advocating for a system which says go and find the information you want to corroborate for your beliefs, and then in that framework that I'm advocating here, you will be provided the opportunity to challenge that. And it's up to you to whether you do or not. But the difference is that sort of system, everyone will decide for themselves, versus another system that says, well, we're going to decide for you. And in doing so, we'll upset everyone that's done that already, because everyone does. It doesn't matter. So I believe in objective truth. I don't think what you decide is true matters in the slightest against objective truth. But we live in a society where everyone's deciding truth for themselves, and we need to help them get to objective truth as best as we can as a society. Sorry, go.
Yeah, great talk, and I think what you're aiming for is noble, and you described yourself as a future optimist. To take a pessimistic stance for a second, like similar to what the other person was saying about people will decide for themselves. I think I feel like the problem is more that the amount of information is just too overwhelming. Even before fake news, it was overwhelming. People's lives are encouraged to be on display 24/7, and people spend an inordinate amount of time putting things out there to be consumed, and then consuming things instead of doing what this probably should be really doing as humans, productive members of society, or whatever. So how do you see that tide kind of winning out in this overall battle for critical thinking? Like, I feel like, to take a basic stance, like, people will just decide that they don't have time for this, and they will just shut off, which is what people are already doing today. And yeah, how can we reverse that? Like, without, I don't know, how do we create a society where we don't, on the one hand, we encourage people to connect with each other, but we don't also just make it completely about echo chambers and self-serving kind of truths and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. Did that make sense?
I'll answer what I got from it, and then you tell me if I'm answering the question or not. Yes, there is like the internet image, right? It's all human knowledge. If you're going to dive into that, of course it's overwhelming. This is why we have Google to help us find what we're interested in. This is why we have social media to help us identify what our social circles are concerned with and serendipitously discover information. They are sorting mechanisms to help us make sense of this overwhelming mass. Now, the fact that people are still feeling overwhelmed is because those platforms are so good at gamifying themselves to make us buy in more and more and more. And so this is a problem for every individual to figure out for themselves of how much they're willing to be overwhelmed or not. And people want to turn off Facebook and shut it out for a while. Great, that's good for them. What this system does is allows people to, when someone decides I'm interested in vaccination and you go to Google, how irritating it is that Google has followed your search habits and browsing habits and decided what sort of belief system you have and give you a bunch of results that will feed into your belief system. You will get what you want, and that's great, but if you, and I've done this quite a few times because I always need to look for rebuttals, so I go to Google, I'm trying to find a critique of something, but every search I get just gives me all these people that reinforce my beliefs, and it's really hard to get out of that. So when I Google vaccination and I'm getting all these things, I'm being overwhelmed with a bunch of articles that are not answering my question, and I have to read through them all to figure that out, and that's frustrating. This system allows you to type in the thing, get the first article that comes up, and then get a defined debate that's been optimized. So it's another way of cutting through the noise. Google and social media provide the first step, the discovery process. This provides the contextualization and debate process. So most people won't want to read all those articles. They don't have to. But the people that are interested in it, or people that are having an argument about it and want to get the winning hand, they can go and research it. It's about making it easier to access information and not pushing everyone to be forced to know everything, because that's also impractical and impossible.
I really like your idea, and I think it's worth trying it since it's better than the current state. And I just wondered if you considered, for example, not a rebuttal, but if I'm on an article, I would like to have, for example, the top 3 most interesting Wikipedia links about the subject of this article. Maybe not the rebuttal pro or con, but just I want to know more about this topic to better understand. Mm-hmm. May I have the 3 top interesting Wikipedia links, for example? And also, I've heard about automatic language processors that can flag articles are being heated or using words which are flags for no thinking or something like that. Could we maybe integrate those tools into the extension to have to be automatic, neutral, and
so also to be quickly clear about the rebuttal thing. Rebuttal's still running, and I'm still working on that, but I kind of view this whole thing as separate now, with the Socratic Web being more like a public good thing, and rebuttal is more the prototype that we can look to for lessons guiding us forwards. As for providing a list of more information on this topic, this system, that hasn't come out. The value of this system is really in the critical relationship And I don't think that there's any room or need to have anything in it other than that. And the reason for that is several. First of all, that's the way the web works naturally. If you write an article, you link to things that agree with you or things that provide more information. Comments are typically by people that read that publication and agree with it and will provide more context. If you're reading an article on a topic and you want to find other articles on that topic, you can Google that. You can go to Wikipedia yourself and search Wikipedia. All these things are really easy to find. And so this platform no value is added to the whole thing by adding that sort of functionality. Even if you do want it, people have probably made things that do that quite easily, because that sort of thing is easily solved as a general rule. So no, I think, within this platform, critiques is the only thing that matters, because it's the only thing which you can't find anywhere. And you had a sort of second part of the question about
automatic language processing.
Automatic language processing. So one of the things that I am also excited about for the future of this is that once this is set up and integrated into lots of platforms and widely known and used, is that it is a foundational framework that anything can be done to. The organization, as I see it, that will control it, will just focus on the database, the algorithm, and the voting controls. But that's still created an amazing database with an amazing map of the internet. And the ability for people to go in, academics and companies to go in and scrape that data and analyze the language, to create extra plugins that synthesize the arguments, maybe grabs the top 10 arguments, pulls all the language out and finds the common arguments and presents this is how this debate breaks down. Everything can be done with it. I'm not going to worry about that, though, because personally I don't have the expertise to go into that sort of stuff, and so I'm not even bothering thinking about it. But I know it will happen, because the data will just be sitting there for anyone to use. And that's incredibly exciting. It's just not available now because it's not organized to provide that function.
I really like the idea you're presenting here, and when you did, there was one particular thing you pointed out with the where articles are verified as this has been disproven.
Yep, the Facebook's flagging.
Flagged as fault, that issue. If they could, the first thing that came to mind is if they could simply have a three-way flag, verified as false, or unverified. That will be the first obvious tweak, so that you can actually see one way or the other. That sidesteps that immediate problem. The next thing that occurred to me was what you wind up with here through the rebuttal, counter-rebuttal, counter-rebuttal, and so on. You could wind up with an aggregate weighting that could then be reflected in the same way on a link on that page. This has been weighed in on to this degree, and the sum of the arguments leans towards this is true, or this is to this extent not quite. This is to this just to some extent.
So what you're describing makes me think that would be like on a broader topic area, like God exists or God doesn't exist sort of thing, rather than specific articles.
I'm thinking more that it could apply to specific articles, because you could simply because of the weighted discussion that was linked from those articles. But the next thing that occurred was, as you were just discussing about natural language analysis and breaking it down into its constituent bits. To me, the next natural step from that would be a synthetic news source that took that approach to each of the components of a story in a discussion, and then present and. From where you could explore the sources of those various arguments.
So it sounds like, like I was saying, once the data's there, anyone can go and do whatever they want with it and create all sorts of things. So it sounds like you're saying that an obvious application would be to have a third party create some natural language processing, go in and analyze all of the articles in all this array, try and get the main arguments and synthesize it into basically like a Wikipedia article saying, here is the current state of knowledge on this thing. I expect that will probably happen, and there may be some value in it, maybe even sort of basically competing with Wikipedia to some extent, or maybe synthesizing into Wikipedia and improving Wikipedia. All for it. But it goes back to that same, and like it's great, but it's a different thing. it is a Wikipedia, which already exists. It's like it's a website that people will choose to go to, and lots of people. When it's done through the system, if people respect the system, they may end up going, you know what, I had this belief, but the system has analysed it, like this, and the system you're advocating has analysed it and come up with this conclusion, and maybe that will change people's minds. So maybe it'll be somewhat better than Wikipedia because people feel Wikipedia is biased based on the people that write it. But it will end up being another platform that people pick and choose. It's another Fox News, another Wikipedia, Conservapedia.
Oh, absolutely. It will be just another source, although I see it more as a competitor to Wikinews than Wikipedia.
Yeah, although it's one of the complications with starting all this talking about fake news is that because I worked on this world before fake news was a thing, I still look at this as an internet misinformation thing. It's not just people saying that the Pope endorses Donald Trump. It's whether vaccines kill babies or not. It's whether chemtrails are real. Is nuclear power the solution to our problems? Is GMOs safe to eat? These are scientific questions that have answers, but the public doesn't know. The public's confused. And I think, and actually one of the things that I haven't pointed out in this, but it does get to what you were just talking about, is that a lot of people say, oh, but we've got peer review or whatever and stuff like that. This is another level aspect where the forefront of knowledge is a challenging thing, and peer review is written by experts for experts, and is very different to what we do to present information to the public. And so Wikipedia is something that's for the public. News is often written by science journalists, ideally, rarely, that communicate science to the public. And so this platform is for the public. So it's just sort of interesting to always keep that in mind when you're trying to go, well, this is a way to help communicate the truth to the public. It's like, it is, but on a very particular level of communication that's accessible to anyone that wishes to access it. Whereas this isn't. So in other words, what I'm saying is, what you just described will compete with Wikipedia, but this and any version of what you described will never compete with peer review because they are operating on completely different fronts of knowledge. Just an aside. I think that's it.
Questions?
Lead everyone out.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really well delivered, man.
Thanks.
Thank you. Very well delivered. Thanks for your hard work.
Thanks.
Do you need some donations or something like that? Or
so
didn't ask for?
No. My next step is to